I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with the New Look creator Todd A. Kessler and Executive Producer Lorenzo di Bonaventura. Guys, these days, when you think about high fashion, Dior, Chanel, Balenciaga, Balmain, they represent this rarefied, aspirational glamour and luxury. So I'm wondering, did bringing this show to life give you any insight into the impact that fashion has on our culture, given the impact that Dior and Chanel had back in the day?
Well, it definitely, I mean, it gave a lot of insight about the impact on fashion and culture, but also where the creations were coming from. The original, like the OG creation, couture, which redefined the second half of the 20th century, is coming out of the Nazi occupation of France during World War II, the darkest period of 20th century history, perhaps. And out of that, this explosion of creativity and life and the ability to live again, to dream again, to have fantasy, and to create. So for me, the aspect of the insight was that these creations are coming from something that's deeply personal. And what we all respond to in its beauty is that, whether we knew it specifically or not, it's something that, as we all know, when you listen to music or watch a film or look at paintings, anything that's artistic, the things that you're connecting to subtextually are there for the creator that you're responding to.
And I think one of the things that was interesting is that's sort of step one. And step two is that you then start looking at the actual product, the actual art in a very different way, because you've come to learn the people, you've come to understand the person behind it. And so I see things different. You know, my equivalent thing is, I'm a bit older, so I can say back in the day when we had vinyl, you would pour over the album because it had all this information and it informed how you looked at that artist. And so for me on this show, that's what happened to me. It was like all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I see that dress in a different way now.
Yeah. Yeah. I always look at fashion from a distance and it feels a bit removed for me. And as I was explaining to one of the stars of this show, Ben Mendelsohn, and we both agreed that it kind of gave us a bit more insight that there are human beings behind what the beautiful creations that they make. And I really appreciated that about this show. And then I started thinking, okay, so you decided to frame it as this rivalry, I guess, between Coco and Christian, who never really crossed paths much during this series. So, Todd, what did you make of that, so to speak, rivalry, and why was it important for you to frame the series along those lines, at least to begin with?
Well, there are so many levels to the rivalry. So there's the surface rivalry of what you would think of two people who are going head to head in a business world. That's not what the show is about. The show is not about that rivalry of two people who are in a competitive business of fashion. Fundamentally, what the show is, and when I say that there are many levels, the decisions that both Coco Chanel and Christian Dior made during the Nazi occupation of Paris as to how to survive and how to deal with the Nazis who are occupying their city, and the history of the history of Germany and France and World War I, then leading into World War II. And so the choices that each of them made is one level of what that rivalry is, because Chanel was in a position to be able to close her workshop, refuse to design for Nazis. Dior was a younger, unknown designer who was basically using the money that he made designing for Nazi wives and girlfriends in Paris to help fund his younger sister who was in the resistance. Meanwhile, Chanel is living at the Ritz, is dating someone affiliated with the Nazis, and goes on missions for the Nazis, but yet refuses to design for them. That's one level of their rivalry without them even knowing each other, or without them being close. They did know each other. A second thing is what they both did stylistically for women's clothing. So Chanel was very much more of an avant-garde modernist, and she took women out of the corset, freed them from that. This is going back into the 1920s. If you think of the flapper styles, which are more of the 30s, the dresses that are less shape. Dior ends up putting them back, putting women back into a corset, and in Chanel's perspective, setting women back 50 years. So there's a rivalry in their approach and in their design aesthetic. There's also a rivalry in how they created. So Dior was an obsessive sketcher. Chanel never sketched. Chanel created clothes on models. Dior didn't like to touch women. Didn't like to touch the models, not women. Didn't like to touch them. He liked to sketch and then actualize his designs. So there's a difference in creativity. There's a difference in how they move through the world politically, and there's just a difference in who they are as people.
And I think also to add to that, Todd's original intent was really around Dior. And the more you read, the more you realized their names were colliding. So it became inescapable in a way not to do the two sides, and if you look at it in I'll say a royal kind of way, she was the queen of fashion until he knocked her off her perch.
Yeah.
And then he became the king of fashion, and then her struggle is, I want to become that again. And so and that's over a long, that's over decades that we're now saying that, but, and she does rise again, and so it's a natural flow of a story. Actually could go 20 plus years with the dynamic that's going on between the two people.
And also one thing that's amazing is throughout the world to today, if you see a Dior store, it's very likely that a Chanel store is either, in the close vicinity or like a block away, like on the same street or a block away. They're still put together in New York City on 59th Street. There's Dior, Chanel, Balenciaga, Balmain, Givenchy, Pierre Cardin, like they're all there.
Yeah.
And so it's to realize that this movement is 80 years old from World War II, and yet they're still all grouped together. So there's a natural competition, a natural rivalry between all these designers.
That's right. And even in this day and age, the unwashed masses are still aspire. We still look at these brands as luxury, as the pinnacle of fashion and art, and that amazes me that is still going. Moving on a little bit, Lorenzo, as such a prolific film producer, what led you to working with Todd, and what did you want to bring to the table to guide and shepherd and support the show's creative vision?
Well, first of all, I would say I was interested in getting more involved in television because I find feature films have been boxed into a very narrow creative window. And so what was happening, but Todd and I have been very good friends for 20 years or so. I don't know exactly, but 19, 20 years. And so really it was the two of us a few years ago looking at each other and going, well, why aren't we doing this together? Because he had learned of my interest, and I really admire his creativity, and every show that he's been involved in, whether he's created it or not, the outcome has had a high quality, and it has always sort of provoked me as a viewer to be engaged. And there's no higher compliment for me as somebody who's lived in the world of entertainment. That's what you're desperately trying to do in everything, is get the viewer emotionally and viscerally connected. And so when we started talking about it, actually, and then we partnered, and then he had 3 or 4 ideas that he was like, all right, I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about this. And when he said Dior, I said Dior. And he probably was surprised that I did that, but it instinctually, I think he was onto something because it is so relevant to us today. I mean, brands are so much a part of every aspect of our lives, and those brands are dominating a lot of the social conversation. So I knew that would be compelling for an audience to find out more, because I didn't know much either. When I was nuts, I knew nothing really. And then once you did 7 years of research, and so over that time period, we're talking about different things and what he's interested in, why, and oh my God, this story. And so for me, the most satisfying experience I can have when I'm as a producer is to help a creator like Todd to deliver something that's special, and this felt very special to me. So it invigorates my hope and vigor in terms of protecting it from through a process that can often destroy the very thing you're trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a hell of a lot of sense. And I was thinking, Todd, this is a bit of a departure that we're used to seeing from you. After you decided to take this on board and you spent so much time and effort researching and honing and chiseling, did you ever have moments of like self-doubt that you could pull it off? Kind of similarly to, I guess, like what Dior had to put up with throughout this whole season, where he suffered with a lot of self-doubt?
Uh, you know, for me, I welcome the self-doubt because that means I'm onto something that it excites me. I don't wanna not be able to pull it off. I don't wanna fail, but the potential that I'm not sure if we can do it. It's the first series that I've ever done, period, in a time period that's not modern. It's the first series I've ever done, overseas. So we shot it all in Paris or all in France, mostly in Paris. And it's the first series that I've done that's directly about real people.
Yeah.
And so all of those things for me is like, that's all new. All three of those things are new. I had never worked in France before. Lorenzo had done movies in France before.
Mhm.
Part of the reason why I wanted to work with Ben was because we had a great relationship, Ben Mendelsohn, working on Bloodline together. So I had this feeling that if Ben came aboard, that I would at least have an anchor from which I could begin to get into these areas of like, let's explore this together. But I have to say that the idea that there's self-doubt and I'm not sure is what excites me and is really in a way the narcotic of pursuing it. Because if it was like, oh yeah, I've done that before, that's not exciting. And if it's someone else has done it before, that's not exciting. But to be in new terrain, similar to Bloodline, no one had shot a series down in the Florida Keys before. That was super exciting to get down there and see what's possible. And in this, the ambition of it, for me, was unprecedented. And that's why the pairing specifically on this with Lorenzo was so fundamentally important because of his huge experience with productions and also just being able to, there are people that you come across in life and everything slows down and it expands horizontally so you can see what the moves are in order to orchestrate what the goal is, which is to leave an indelible impression in creating a series that hasn't been done before.
And I think one other aspect is we really wanted this to be cinematic
Yeah.
because the time period you're picking. I sometimes worry that when you do period pieces, they can feel a little drawing room or a little brittle. And so it was in that desire to create a big palette. It's one of the reasons why we really insisted on shooting in Paris, for instance, because we wanted to give the audience a sense of what does that city feel like at that moment, not what does it feel like inside the drawing rooms.
Absolutely. Visually, this show is breathtaking. And I can imagine that'd be so hard to pull off. It's great that you were able to film this in Paris. I can't imagine how it would have looked had you not been able to shoot there. I'm curious to both of you, when you're doing a period piece and you have to deal with being somewhat historically accurate, you also want it to look amazing. So you've got to surround yourself with the best of the best, the creme de la creme, so to speak. Is it as challenging as it looks to get a period piece and to do it properly?
I think it is as challenging, but one of the very inspiring things is to be met by artists who are completely devoted, and the idea of filming it in Paris, which we stuck to our guns when we were being encouraged not to film it in Paris, for a whole variety of reasons. Uh, we were
All to
then
do with
met.
cost.
Well,
All to do with cost.
and then interviewing designers, craftspeople who live in Paris, our incredible production designer, Anne Sibel, our spectacular costume designer, Karen Sereau, and to realize that this is a story that resonates in their personal lives because they had relatives who lived through the war. And so they're bringing not only their artistry of what they're able to deliver, in terms of, as an example, our production designer also worked on Emily in Paris. So she's aware of how to show Paris in a modern way, but had not had the opportunity to show Paris during the occupation. She worked with Woody Allen anytime he shoots in France. And so it became personal. And that's what we're searching for, is how do you find people who it's not just another job, it's something that they can express themselves, whether it's actors, other directors, crew members. And it really felt like, oh, with this passion, we can accomplish anything, with understanding that we have to stay within a budget, and we want to bring an audience to an experience that they can't have anywhere else.
And I would add to that, that one of the interesting parts of any decision, and I've worked on different projects where we've had sort of different mottos, you really have to start by saying to everybody, this is the challenge right up the front. And, it just, you don't have to repeat it, but you have to say, look, guys, we need to do this. We've said we can do this and we're counting on you. And so it was a mantra on the show of how do we give you the most rich visual experiences we could do.
Yeah. Let's talk about the actors as well. We mentioned Ben Mendelsohn. This is a departure for him as well. I wasn't expecting him to be Dior, and he's so good in this role. And honestly, for me, my launching pad into the series was firstly because I'm a fan of Todd's work, but also Oscar-winning Juliette Binoche as Coco Chanel. Okay, I'm in. I don't need to know any more than that. I'm curious, what do those two, Ben Emmy winner, Juliette Oscar winner, what do they offer? What do they bring to the table that really made this show as special as it became?
Well, I'll jump in and say the Juliet side of it for a second. I think one of the things that we were really hoping to do, Coco is a very bigger than life character. I'll say iconic. And we really felt strongly we needed a French icon, Juliette Binoche. And so our thinking really was driven by that. Now, obviously, she's a wonderful actress and we were lucky, but we really felt like Coco's personality somehow is more external. And therefore, we needed a French person to do that, whereas Dior's was internal. And I think a less, very demanding, actually, obviously internal, sometimes more demanding than external. But Adam, you should speak to that. I mean, but it was important that we found the actual characteristic of what we were trying to find.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I completely agree with that. Also, in speaking with the actors, both Ben and Juliette, in addition to Maisie and Glenn Close and John Malkovich and Emily Mortimer and Clay Spang, and the desire is to provide the actors with an opportunity to feel safe in being vulnerable. And what I mean by vulnerable isn't just emotionally vulnerable, but it's to take a chance and do something that they may not have had done in their careers. And these are actors who have, had very varied roles and have been doing this for a long time. But this feeling of like, there is an opportunity here. The ambition is there's the opportunity to do the best work of your life. Now, what that means to me, I can't tell you what is going to be the best work or how you're going to connect to it. But if you can figure that out for yourself and you're willing to take a chance, which also means it may not work, which also means that certain things may fail. But if you're willing to fail, my belief is that you then have the ability to succeed way past what you can imagine your connection can be, your vulnerability can be. So you have to understand that we're coming together, and the process is going to be one where we support the exploration. And these characters, because I've never done something based on real people. I mean, based on real people for me in my life, but not real known people.
Yeah.
And what was amazing for, I think, everyone in every role that's there, as they got into the research about who the person was, they found certain things that they connected to deeply personally. And then that opened up that ability to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And the desire to be vulnerable.
And I think there's one other thing that's very interesting. I've done 3 movies now based on real people, and now a TV show. And it becomes, for the actors and for everybody, but especially the actors, it becomes almost messianic to represent them the way they were. And so it's a really compelling motivation for them
Wow.
to do
That's so
them
cool.
justice, if
Yeah,
you
to do
would.
them justice.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Guys, I wish we had more time because there's so much that we could have also touched on, including the
We're having
amazing
fun,
music.
but so if you want to ask another question, fire
Okay,
away.
one more quick question before I let you go. The unsung hero of this show, honestly, for me, my personal opinion, is the music. James Levine's score and main title theme are so outstanding. And then you brought in Jack Antonoff, like probably the most popular, most prolific music producer at the moment, to produce a covers album. Like, that blows my mind. It's such a good album. So quick question really for the two of you is, music is so pivotal to a good show, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yes.
well,
Yes.
yeah. If you've ever heard, and this is what I think is interesting, is it's not just that it's good, is that it understands how to support the drama. Because you can sometimes hear a score, it's a great score, but somehow it didn't do what you needed it to do. You know, and Adam's worked with the composer before, so you should speak to that, Todd. But you know, that's what's really interesting to me, is having, and also if you ever watch a show without the music, you know exactly how important it is.
Well, what was very inspiring was having the idea to, we had 10 episodes and to pick a period song for each episode. So 10 episodes, 10 songs. Take the period song, which was very popular between the 20s and the 40s, deconstruct it, so to speak. Have James Levine, who I worked with on Damages and Bloodline, so we had done 8 seasons prior. We had have a very good working relationship. Explain that the desire is to deconstruct the song, not have it be identifiable, even if you knew the song, which many people may not know some of these songs, but start it with Dior, the second half of the melody, of the first phrase of the melody, then go to Chanel and have it be the first part of the melody. So you've even flipped it. Over the course of the episode, the pieces of the song come together, and Jimmy was amazing at helping actualize this, obviously, and then it lead into a modern cover of the song that then Jack produced. So what it did for me was, instead of having score that is, can be beautiful, but is somewhat random and you're just inventing it, it ties it to the period. And there's a visceral experience to be connected to that period through the songs that people were listening to, through the songs that Dior, Chanel, the other characters would have known in that time period. And it just creates experience that transports the audience. So then you listen to the Jack Antonoff produced covers with Lana Del Rey and Florence from Florence and the Machine, the 1975, Nick Cave, Jack himself, Perfume Genius, like all these incredible singers. And if you then click over to the actual song itself from 1936 or 1928 or that it provides this experience of like, all right, this is 80 years ago. This is a song that still has emotional resonance all those years ago. 100, I mean, I think the oldest song is now 100 years old that we use in the show. So that feeling is, in a way, a new look. You look at the title of the show, it's not just Dior's collection, it's also a new look at history, a new look at what the French Resistance did that many people aren't aware of. A new look at these designers, a new look at the music. It's a new look at history in a way that we just haven't thought about it before or seen it previously.
That's amazing. I'm so enamored with this show. Thank you so much for your time today and your insight, and congrats on some really wonderful work.
Pleasure.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you.